Hello, and welcome to another of Starting 11's press conferences. My name is Lloyd and thank you so much for joining me as we take a pass at some of the week's biggest soccer stories. Now, the sun is shining, I have my first sunburn of the season, and it's almost time for the World Cup, so let's start by looking at some squads. Anthony Martial, Adrien Rabiot, and Alexandre Lacazette all did not make the cut for the final French team, despite showing moments of brilliance throughout the year. Bayern Munich's central midfielder Tolisso did make the cut, but his teammate winger Kingsley Coman is also being held on the reserves for the France squad. Ready to be blown away by just how deep France's squad is for this tournament? The 23 that were selected are stacked, but some other notable names that didn't get picked: Karim Benzema, Aymeric Laporte, Dimitri Payet, and Kurt Zouma. Brazil are another of the tournament favourites, and they're also leaving some huge names at home like Alex Sandro, David Luiz and Fabinho. League One sensation Malcolm isn't going either, and neither's new Barca boy Arthur. Emre Can didn't make the squad for Germany, and his fellow Premier League stars Joe Hart and Jack Wilshere were the most controversial exclusions from England's lineup. But Adam Lallana and Ryan Bertrand were also notably excluded, especially as Danny Rose, another left-back, did make the cut. Argentina are yet to announce their finalised squad, but Lionel Messi will be hoping for one last shot at glory with the national team. The Argentinian Football Association appears to have taken its eye off the ball though, as it was forced to apologise and retract a chapter in a manual it was giving out to journalists covering the World Cup on the subject of how to flirt with Russian women. Some of the lowlights of the suggestions included looking clean, smelling nice and dressing well, and that when encountering women that they should treat them as, quote, someone of worth. They also suggested in the manual to be selective with which women they pursued and to go with some self-confidence. The AFA said that it was printed by mistake, but it was an entire chapter. Despite Buenos Aires seeing the largest women's march in South America earlier this year, it seems like some people in the soccer world still haven't gotten the message. One man who's had no problem flirting in Russia is former Zenit St. Petersburg coach Roberto Mancini, who throughout his entire year in the World Cup hosting country has not been shy about his desire to take on the Italian national team job. It was initially reported that Carlo Ancelotti was the preferred option to take on the head coaching role for the Azzurri, and even offered the job, but he declined, having his eye on some other club-level roles. Enter Mancini, who'd been batting his eyes at the Italian Football Federation even while still in a job at Zenit. In interviews when he was supposed to be discussing his plans for the Russian club, he'd always find a way to slip in just how keen he was for the Italy job and just how he'd go about restoring his national side to its former glory. Well, he's pulled, so perhaps he should be the one writing the manual. It's reported he's planning on bringing back Mario Balotelli into the fold, but one player who will not be returning to the national side is Gigi Buffon. The legendary keeper announced his impending departure from Juventus earlier this week after 17 seasons and 150 games with the club. Over the course of that time, he's won 9 Serie A titles, 5 Coppa Italias, 1 UEFA Cup, 1 World Cup, and a partridge in a pear tree. Of course, the one that eluded him is the Champions League, so the sudden and new links to the thirstiest Champions League club of them all, PSG, do make sense. Buffon revealed he'd planned on retiring completely until last week when he received some interesting offers on and off the pitch. He has, however, ruled out playing for another Italian side or a lower league team, and the most recent suggestion is that he could be heading to PSG. He's allegedly in advanced talks with the club, and even past his prime would still be a colossal signing for new PSG boss Thomas Tuchel, who was announced earlier this week. He's got a massive job on his hands, with Champions League improvement in his first season presumably what his position depends on. Add to that winning a domestic double is practically expected, and he'll also be judged on how well he can cull PSG's enormous wage bill of overaged and underperforming stars. Oh, and he'll also need to bring through youth players and sort out that Neymar transfer situation. The Champions League final is still a week away, but the Europa League final happened this week, and it was relatively little pressure for Atletico Madrid, who comfortably beat Marseille 3-0. Marseille's star and captain Dimitri Payet went off injured at the 31-minute mark, but not before Atleti's star Antoine Griezmann opened the scoring for the Spanish side. He struck again after half-time, and Atletico's captain Gavi put the game well beyond Marseille's reach with a third goal in the 89th minute. After the game, an elated Griezmann said that he left his family at 14 to win trophies, and that under coach Diego Simeone, he's grown into one of the best players in the world. However, the question of whether he'll stay to try and win more trophies with Atletico next season remains unanswered, and plenty of clubs are fighting it out for the French forward's signature. As we discussed last week, the leading candidate for that contract is Barcelona, who, after having their 43-game unbeaten streak snapped by Levante at the weekend, are in obvious need of one of the world's best forwards. It was the first time Barca had lost to Levante since 1964, and even a Felipe Coutinho hat-trick couldn't stem the embarrassment. His goals were cancelled out by a hat-trick from Emmanuel Boateng, which was the first hat-trick that Barcelona have conceded since 2005, and it was the first time they conceded 5 goals in a game since 2003. Lionel Messi and Gerard Piqué were both rested, but it seriously calls into question Barca's squad depth as they begin to plan for a future without their historic academy graduates like Iniesta. Arsene Wenger reckons that domestic leagues will soon take a back seat to a European Super League, though, he predicted in his final press conference as Arsenal manager. He said that it was, quote, inevitable for a European Super League to take over from domestic leagues on the weekends and domestic games be moved to weekdays. It's another example of how football's being redesigned for a TV audience who wants to watch the biggest clubs play each other each week rather than the smaller teams. Wenger is incredibly connected to both UEFA and FIFA, so while his suggestion may sound a little far-fetched, you only have to look at the way that TV deals are increasingly going among Europe's elite clubs and the increasing gulf in talent between the haves and the have-nots in domestic leagues. Wenger's suggestion for a European Super League may be one of the only ways to keep things genuinely interesting. His suggestion that English footballers eat pasta and fish also sounded far-fetched when he first came to the UK some 20 years ago, but look at him now! Speaking of predictions, up until now though, Arsene Wenger had not predicted who would be replacing him on the touchline at the Emirates next year. Plenty of big-name coaches are being bandied around, like Carlo Ancelotti, Massimiliano Allegri, and even Luis Enrique, but it's former players that seem to have emerged as favourites, with the likes of Patrick Vieira and Thierry Henry both linked. Wenger finally had his say in an interview late this week, backing another former player, Mikel Arteta, to succeed him. Arteta has emerged as the favourite to get the Arsenal job over the past week, and Wenger's new affirmation should only speed things along. Arteta played under Wenger for 5 years before retiring and joining Pep Guardiola at Man City as a coach. Guardiola is thought to rate him extremely highly and would be seriously disappointed to lose him, which should speak volumes about just how well he thinks Arteta could do as a coach. But it would be a huge gamble on Arsenal's part giving the job to somebody with no prior head coaching experience. The North London club have been preparing for a more modern head coach rather than a traditional British-style manager like Wenger by bringing in plenty of supporting personnel to assist whoever gets the job, so Arteta could be primed for success. And if the Arsenal job doesn't work out, maybe he can go to his other former club, Everton, who after sacking Sam Allardyce also need a new head coach. Allardyce treated the position like one last lucrative firefighting job when it had the potential to be so much more for him, and for that utter lack of ambition, no Everton fans are going to be sorry to see the back of him, especially not if they end up getting Marco Silva finally, as rumoured. Or ex-Everton boss David Moyes, who's newly available after somewhat redeeming himself from abysmal spells at Real Sociedad and Sunderland by keeping the Hammers up through a turbulent season, but still fell victim to the managerial merry-go-round this week. They've been linked with some very successful coaches to replace Moyes and have said that they want to announce a coach with, quote, experience at the highest levels of the game within the next week. The favourite is former Premier League title-winning Manchester City coach Manuel Pellegrini, who's currently coaching out in China and could possibly be tempted back to the English capital. But other names in the mix include recently dismissed PSG boss Unai Emery and Newcastle's Rafa Benitez if they can tempt him from one mess of a club to another. One of the few Premier League managers whose position is genuinely safe is Pep Guardiola, who after seeing his City side reach 100 points this season, received 2 Manager of the Year awards from the Premier League and the League Managers Association. The Spanish coach has also been given a 2-year contract extension for his efforts, meaning that he now has until 2021 to achieve the club's ultimate aim, winning a Champions League trophy. He's been improving every player in the side this season and lowered the average age of the squad to 23. So the heights really do seem limitless as long as they can keep their genius coach. And the megabucks signings rolling in. Speaking of money though, despite easily winning the league, Manchester City did not make the most money in the Premier League this season. No, their crosstown rivals Manchester United got the last laugh on that front. Manchester City finished with a combined £149.4 million for their first place finish and the number of televised games they played. Manchester United had 2 more games televised than City did though, and so despite finishing second, still finished with £149.7 million. Jose Mourinho will have to be careful not to die laughing before spending that money on the squad overhaul he allegedly has planned this summer, but you've got to imagine that on some level, Pep's got to be at least a little bit fuming. Not only have his teams broken records all season long, they have played irresistible football compared to Mourinho's sluggish and unimaginative style. But who has more games broadcast around the world as an advertisement for the Premier League? Mourinho. It'll be genuinely interesting to see if that's the case again next year, and if Manchester United's global fan base and appeal can keep them above City in this significant metric. To finish on something we can all get behind though, Mohamed Salah broke the record for the number of goals scored in a 38-game Premier League season. Finishing the season with 32 goals in 36 games, he beat records set by Cristiano Ronaldo, Alan Shearer and Luis Suarez, turning himself into an instant Premier League legend in his first season at Liverpool. He'll be looking to add to that tally and potentially break more records when he plays against Real Madrid in the Champions League final next week, but to do that he's gonna need a new pair of boots. A pair of his studs were donated to the British Museum by Adidas to mark his achievements this year, where they'll be displayed in a hall of other Egyptian artifacts like ancient sandals and mummies. It seems a fitting location for the shoes of a player known as the Pharaoh, but the British Museum said that there is a serious angle to it too, in that they wanted to have something to commemorate the story of a modern Egyptian icon. It was nice that the British Museum waited to have these particular artifacts donated to them, rather than just pinching them when they felt like it. That's all we've got for this week, but let us know in the comments below what your reactions are to the World Cup squads as they're announced. And don't forget to let us know what other kind of videos you'd like to see on this channel. Give this one a like if you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Lloyd Mallison, and I'll see you soon.